In 43 AD, the island of Britannia existed on the very edge of the Roman maps. For the average legionary, crossing the English Channel meant stepping into a terrifying, mythical wilderness crawling with unknown threats. Back in Rome, Emperor Claudius desperately needed to conquer that wilderness. He was a physically vulnerable and widely mocked leader who had only recently survived an assassination attempt on his predecessor. To secure his fragile grip on power, he required a military triumph, and he chose Britannia as his prize. Before the invasion even began, he faced a massive logistical hurdle. The Roman troops were so paralyzed by the thought of the ocean that they mutinied on the beaches of Gaul. It took a freed slave named Narcissus, acting on the emperor's behalf, to weaponize Roman pride. He mocked the soldiers, using reverse psychology, until they finally boarded the ships. This delay actually worked in Rome's favor. They landed unopposed on the beaches of Kent because the waiting British tribal alliance had assumed the Romans weren't coming and disbanded their army to tend to their spring harvests. Claudius had his troops on the island, but his political survival now relied on Commander Aulus Plautius driving those 40,000 men deep into hostile territory before the scattered British tribes could reform and spring a trap. Plautius marched his legions westward, following ancient tracks through the countryside. Soon, the entire Roman advance slammed into a massive geographical bottleneck, the wide tidal waters of the river Medway. Looking at this tactical map, you can see the scale of the trap. The Romans have roughly 40,000 troops stalled on the eastern bank. On the opposite side, the Britons have rapidly reformed an immense multi-tribal army of nearly 100,000 men. The British lines are anchored by their chariot units. These are highly mobile, rapid response vehicles. They operate like modern helicopters, zipping along the riverbank to instantly reinforce any weak point in the defense. If Plautius attempted a slow, conventional crossing, the British chariots would simply swarm the landing sites, pinning the heavy infantry in the water before they could even form their lines. To break the stalemate, Plautius deployed his Batavian auxiliaries. Drawn from the lower Rhine region, these troops operated as Roman special forces. They were specifically trained to swim across turbulent rivers while carrying their weapons and wearing full-body armor. The Batavians slipped into the Medway entirely undetected. When they reached the far bank, they completely ignored the British infantry. Instead, they executed a surgical strike directly on the chariot horses, hamstringing them and instantly crippling the enemy's rapid response network. The sudden destruction of the chariots threw the British lines into chaos. While the enemy was distracted, the Roman 2nd Legion marched toward a sharp bend further down the river. This schematic of the river's hydrodynamics shows why they chose the spot. Water velocity slows on the inside of a bend. That drop in speed deposits sediment on the riverbed, creating a shallow, fordable path protected by water on 3 sides, an ideal fortified bridgehead. The commander who spotted this advantage and led the 2nd Legion across the shallows was Vespasian, a highly capable tactician who would eventually become Emperor of Rome himself. Plautius and Vespasian systematically dismantled the enemy's advantages. By neutralizing the chariots and exploiting the physics of the river bend, they turned a supposedly impassable natural barrier into a manageable logistical problem. With a foothold established, the full weight of Roman institutional knowledge took over. Legionaries were heavily cross-trained as fabri, or craftsmen. For them, engineering and construction were essential branches of combat. Their primary tool was the dalabra, a combination pick and axe. Carrying this implement allowed a soldier to pivot from hacking at enemy shields to clearing timber and shaping earthworks the moment the front line shifted. Engineers relied on pre-cut modular kits from the baggage train. Under combat conditions, they rapidly assembled standardized pontoons on the Medway's banks. Snapping these parts together created a solid surface. This high river. The battle raged for 2 full days. The British warriors relied on wild, furious charges and sweeping strikes with their longswords. In contrast, the Romans maintained tight, disciplined formations, methodically using their short gladius swords to dominate the chaotic, close-quarters fighting. The massive British alliance ultimately collapsed. Modular engineering and ruthless institutional discipline had mathematically dismantled a larger, disorganized force. With the Medway secured, the road to the River Thames lay open. Aulus Plautius paused his advance, allowing Emperor Claudius to cross the channel and personally lead the final march. Claudius even brought war elephants from the continent, staging a spectacular, heavily polished victory parade into the tribal capital of Colchester. 11 regional kings officially surrendered to the emperor. Claudius secured the political triumph he so desperately needed, returning to Rome to claim the title of Britannicus. The crossing at the Medway broke the backbone of the island's tribal resistance. It paved the way for 400 years of systematic Roman occupation, replacing wooden hill forts with roads, administrative centers, and permanent stone architecture. The crossing at the Medway proved a terrifying reality to the ancient world. Rome's industrialized approach to combat could pave over any natural obstacle, turning a river barrier into a highway.